When Cindy stole my boyfriend for the 11th time, I decided to find a dummy boyfriend to see if she would still try to snatch him away. But I never expected the dummy boyfriend to become smart one day. He even turned out to be a jerk. The text message declaring our breakup and his new relationship with my sister popped up on my phone as I sat in the coffee shop below our building, basking in the afternoon sun. The boy trembling as he served my coffee looked like he had Parkinson's. I knew him from working at the cafe for a while. Initially, his good looks attracted many girls to ask for his contact information. However, upon discovering his intellectual disability, they all left disappointed. I was staring at the shaking coffee cups when suddenly one tipped over, spilling brown liquid on my skirt. Frustrated with my cheating former boyfriend and now this spilled coffee, I felt a surge of anger. I stood up, ready to confront the person whose carelessness had caused this mess, only to realize he was quite tall, and I had to look up at him. His expression was sheepish, and his eyes were full of genuine guilt, which made me hold back the curse words. Feeling angry but restraining myself, I watched as the cafe manager, a middle-aged woman, scolded the boy for his mistake. It seemed like she had taken him in out of kindness, but now she couldn't contain her frustration. The boy, looking lost, moved towards me, perhaps thinking I was a kind person for not scolding him. I sighed and intervened, asking the cafe owner how much she paid him. She mentioned it was $800 a month with meals included, considering him a simpleton who wouldn't spend much. I turned to the bewildered boy and offered him $3,000 to work for me instead. His eyes widened at the offer, but he hesitated, mentioning that he had already been paid for the month. The cafe owner hurriedly tried to intervene, but I took out all the money in my wallet, totaling $1,350, and handed it over, telling her to keep the change. In that instant, she pushed the boy towards me as if he were a hot potato, and that's how I ended up buying a boyfriend. Yes, I bought Steve to be my boyfriend. Why did I choose to buy a dummy for a boyfriend? Because no matter what type of boyfriend I had, Cindy always managed to steal him away. I leaned against the wall, waiting for Steve to collect his belongings in that cramped basement room. After bringing Steve home, I immediately pushed him into the bathroom. When I tried to get him to shower, he looked lost, unsure how to operate the water controls. I sighed and walked him through it, laughing at his innocence. Steve seemed scared of the blow dryer, and as I dried his hair, he accidentally splashed water on me, earning a scolding. As I attempted to dry his hair, detailing his injury on the back of his neck, the doorbell rang. It was my sister Cindy, the serial boyfriend thief. She barged in and was surprised to see Steve sitting on the couch. I introduced him as my new boyfriend, and while Cindy inspected him closely, Steve looked away nervously. Cindy made a sly comment about my taste, calling Steve a brainless handsome guy. I didn't feel comfortable with her using those words to describe Steve, so I intervened and urged her to leave. It seemed like a suitable time for her to exit and not get involved. If you just came to see me, you've seen enough. It's time to leave. She was still smiling at me as she left. I didn't come for any specific reason, but my dad wanted me to pass on a message to you. If you don't come home now, don't bother coming back ever. My dad and I have always been on the edge of a breakdown in our relationship. It's all the troubles of blending families, magnified on us. Cindy and I have different mothers, and my stepmother is my dad's first love. My stepmother is the arrogant type, and can't stand me at all. And my dad, out of guilt, spoils her in everything. My childhood memories consist of fighting with my stepmother, her complaining to my dad, and my dad hitting me. So as an adult, I naturally don't want to spend a second in this house. It's been 2 or 3 years since I last went back. I stared at the person sitting on the couch hugging their knees, looking at me with teary eyes. I sighed. So why did I advance $1,000 to bring him back? Well, Steve is pretty obedient, ignoring whether he cleans properly. At least he takes care of the house. When I'm at work, he watches cartoons or draws. The drawings are a bit abstract. When I asked him what he was drawing, he rubbed the paper with his pale fingers for a while. Then he pointed at me and said, "This is sister, this is me." He can't remember complicated names, so he usually just calls me sister. As he said that, the man's deep, cold voice echoed in my ears. It's only then that I realize he's actually a man. He casually wraps his arms around me and can easily do things to me. Even though he looks clueless, his eyes clear. That day, the biggest thunderstorm in months hit. The strong wind made the apartment feel like a beast roaring as it blew in. Usually Steve sleeps on the unfolded sofa in the living room, and I sleep in the bedroom. After a loud thunderclap, I heard something breaking in the living room. The vase on the coffee table was shattered, but no one was on the couch. As I looked for the light switch, I noticed someone crouched in the corner. I pressed the switch, but the light didn't turn on. There have been random power outages these days, and with the stormy night, the power supply must have been disrupted again. I had to go check on the shivering figure in the corner. "What's wrong? Don't be scared. It's just thunder," I said as I reached out to touch him. Suddenly, I realized he might not be scared. He was enduring something. Another thunderclap, followed by a flash of lightning that lit up the room. I only saw his red eyes before he tackled and pinned me to the ground. However, no matter what, I shouldn't ignore the fact that Steve is a man with some abs, going through puberty and with desires. So I couldn't tell if he was kissing or biting me, whether he was being affectionate or venting. I just wanted to reach for the phone on the coffee table to call the police, but in the end, I let go. Instead, I gently rubbed his back. Sometimes, feelings can be transmitted between people. So I held him tightly, calling his name repeatedly. The shattered light in the room, dim and flickering, I realized much later, whenever he looked at me with those guilt-ridden eyes. I couldn't blame him for those mistakes. "You darn kid, you have a way with words." The living room light was shining brightly, and outside the window, it was pitch black. Steve sat cross-legged across from me obediently. I was disinfecting my wound with iodine. Honestly, the bite mark was pretty neat. You could tell he had straight teeth, but my anger had to come out. So I reached out and held his chin. He let me, but his eyes clearly showed confusion and fear. His face felt surprisingly soft. He was forced to open his mouth as I held his chin. It seemed uncomfortable for him. He touched my wrist with his hand, but didn't dare to push my hand away. I let go. "How did the vase break?" "Just like when you handed me the coffee last time." "Were you shaking?" "Your hand doesn't shake when you're drawing." He pursed his lips, leaning in closer to me. His eyes seemed to contain countless tiny stars, innocent yet glittering. "Sister, you're so beautiful. Even if you compliment me, this matter can't be taken lightly." Steve is actually afraid of the dark. After a few times making strange noises in the living room, and then pitifully looking at me, I finally gave in. I ended up sleeping with him on the same bed. At the end of the day, his mindset is like that of a 4 or 5-year-old child. He curls up to sleep, sometimes even snatching my blanket. Not only does he snatch the blanket, but he also has a terrible sleeping posture. In the beginning, I woke up to find myself entangled with a man squirming like an octopus, and almost threw him off the bed. Later, I woke up in his weak breath, and crawled out from under his arm. Indeed, habits are terrifying. Before I met him, I lived my life in a mess. After meeting him, I started to have expectations, like bringing him his favorite fruit cake after work. Every time I passed by the supermarket, I wondered if his paintbrushes were running out. During that time, I surprisingly found happiness in my life. I laughed heartily when I smeared cream on his nose and he looked at me flustered. I laughed until I surprised myself with that laughter. But that's how life is. Smooth sailing has always been a brilliant fantasy for me. I don't know when, but rumors started circulating in the office that I'm the child of a mistress. At first, it was just a few colleagues discussing it in private. Later, even in the cafeteria, people whispered and pointed at me. No need to guess, it's definitely because of my dear stepmother. She has spread rumors and slandered me more than once. In high school, just before my college entrance exam, she hung a banner at the school gate, calling me the child of a mistress. She was the one who actually became the mistress. My mom had just passed away, and she was quickly married to my dad. Yet, she insisted on putting this label on someone else. I've thought about defending myself and explaining my innocence, but when she and my dad showed up hand in hand looking so affectionate, everything I said seemed like a self-defeating lie, only to be met with disdainful looks from others. That afternoon, the manager called me into her office. The manager, a strict woman in her 40s or 50s, mentored me in this company. The air conditioning was on full blast in the office. I closed the glass door. As we locked eyes, I could see a trace of helplessness behind her thin glasses. "Pack up your things this afternoon and settle your accounts with finance." I thought I might be fired, but I never expected it to happen so suddenly. I opened my mouth to ask why. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had worked hard. Just because of baseless gossip, was it enough to discredit all my efforts in the workplace? But I had desperately tried to explain. This job was not easy for me, so my hands were shaking, and in the end, I couldn't accept it. I gritted my teeth and looked up at her. "Can you tell me why?" She just lightly tapped the pen on the table, word by word. "You lack the ability, that's all." Lack the ability? How could I become a team leader within half a year of joining? If I lack the ability, why did almost all my proposals get approved? If I lack the ability, why did I get the biggest share of the year-end bonus? I took a deep breath. If that's how it was, there was nothing more to say. But it wasn't true. As I walked out of the manager's office, Perhaps my actions were a bit abrupt. I didn't control the force when I opened the door. The ornament on the door shook against the glass. The manager sighed behind me. Vivian, your dad must be pretty influential, right? I froze. I opened my mouth, only to realize nothing came out. Was it happening again? My stepmother was against me, and my own father was fully supporting her. On the way home, holding my bag, I leaned against the bus window lost in thought. It looked like it was going to rain. Dark clouds filled the sky, and the wind howled through the open window. Pedestrians hurried by as the bus came to a stop at a station. A father led his daughter up the steps. Dad, when can I eat this cake? The little girl raised her head, asking the man beside her. He smiled and rubbed her nose. Let's sneak a little. Don't let your mom catch us, you little glutton. I watched them, feeling a lump in my throat. Ever since my stepmother arrived, she forbade anyone from celebrating my birthday, forbade my dad from buying me a cake. So, until now, I haven't celebrated my birthday again. Tired, I made plans for the future in my weary mind. I lost my job, and suddenly our household expenses became tight. I could barely support myself, not to mention a grown man. So, when I pulled open the door to find a mess on the floor, I realized that's just how life is. After kicking you once, you get slapped again. I didn't understand why the house was in such disarray. Broken glass, toppled flower pots spilling dirt, or the flour scattered all over the ground. What happened? My eyes wandered around the house, but in the end, I couldn't find the shadow I was looking for. Steve, gone. My mind went blank for a moment, followed by growing panic. I searched every room, every corner, but where could a 6-foot man hide in such a small rented place? I even checked the kitchen cabinets, until my eyes fell on a sketchbook that had fallen to the side. On it, there seemed to be a crooked cake, with flour all over the place and a messy kitchen. I suddenly remembered last night, when he couldn't sleep and hugged me from behind. He asked, "What is a birthday?" I told him, "A birthday is the most important day for a person, a day to eat cake. Can I celebrate sister's birthday?" Steve's voice, hoarse and pitiful, echoed in my ear. "Make a cake." I glanced at his drawing again. His drawings usually required imagination, so the crooked lines might not be a cake, but a little figure holding a cake. This silly guy. Did he make the cake and run outside to find me? Suddenly, a thunderclap outside startled me, and a downpour of rain and howling wind hit abruptly, slamming against the window panes. I stood there for a second or two, then I sprang up and grabbed an umbrella, rushing out of the house. He was so afraid of thunder. If he couldn't find me, where would he go? The wet ground on a rainy night was slippery, and the pouring rain obscured people's vision. Holding an umbrella was too much trouble, so I just put on a hat and ran along the street. As I ran, I called his name. A passing car splashed water over me. I shivered but couldn't find him anywhere. I went to the convenience store, the elementary school, the art supply store. He was nowhere to be found. Finally, I went to the park, a place where I often took him to play. I wished I could find his figure swinging alone on the lonely swing, but there was nothing. I collapsed, panting. "Vivian, what are you looking for?" A whistle suddenly sounded from behind. 2 to 3 people wearing hats and masks surrounded me. "Who are you? What do you want?" I stepped back in panic. I didn't recognize these people at all. "We're just following orders to give Miss a haircut. Your mom says your hair is too long." I couldn't believe this woman had gone so far as to call people to cut my hair. My arm was grabbed, and I tried to struggle, but I couldn't overpower an adult man. I started screaming, and then someone slapped me. "I advise you to behave. Who asked you to run outside in the rain?" The person with scissors gestured and made a cut near my temple. Was this a haircut? This was clearly just reckless cutting. My hair was quite long, grown and well maintained, always complimented on its good condition. I truly couldn't bear to see it being chopped off like this. So, I grabbed the man's arm and fiercely bit into his forearm. As he winced in pain and pushed me away, ready to slap me, a black shadow suddenly dashed out from the corner, straight towards the person holding me, knocking him to the ground. Where did this kid come from? The man grumbled lowly. Now I could see it was Steve, staggering but with a fierce look in his eyes. But I didn't have time to shout his name before he was knocked down by someone. Even when he was being punched and kicked on the ground, he didn't make a sound. Instead, he stared at me intently. Steve's usually clear eyes were now filled with anger for the first time, and a hint of disappointment when he saw me. "What's the matter with you guys? Come at me. Why beat up a guy with disabilities?" I shouted at the group of people, and they stopped. Then, in front of me, someone picked up a metal pipe and struck it straight down towards Steve's head. I was ready to fight. It felt like the pipe was hitting me instead, and for a moment, adrenaline surged through me. But before I could rush over, I was pulled back by someone. Hold on, Vivian, your turn is coming soon. The person with the scissors stood in front of me again. I struggled desperately, but it was no use. He grabbed my hair, and the scissors fell on it. I stared at the long strands of hair falling to the ground, and at the young man lying there, tightly closing his eyes. I screamed out his name, my throat almost hoarse. A gust of wind passed by. The person restraining me was suddenly knocked down by something. I heard the person with the scissors shouting, then the sound of punches landing. Steve stood in front of me, but could that still be Steve? How could a guy with disabilities skillfully dodge the attacks of the man in black, then grab his arm and hit him hard in the face? How could a guy with disabilities cleanly take the scissors back and stab it into another guy's arm? A piercing scream cut through the rainy night sky. In an instant, those people all fell in the muddy ground. The young man, with his hands in his pockets, came to me. He bent down, looked at me. Phone, let me borrow it. Rainwater trickled down his brows, and I stared into his dark eyes. His gaze was no longer clear. I handed him the phone. He dialed a number and his voice turned icy in the rainy night. Yes, it's me. The receiver erupted with a joyful cry, loud enough for even me to hear. Steve just frowned. I'm not dead. I don't know where I am. Wait. There's a woman in front of me. I can ask her. He hung up the phone, then looked down at me. My heart started pounding wildly, but his tone was incredibly flat, without any emotion. Where is this? Who are you? The noise of the rainy night muffled my hearing, and I stared at him blankly until the rain blurred my vision. I heard my own voice, dry and impatient. Don't you remember me, Steve? The person in front of me just frowned slightly. Who is Steve? The flashing lights on the police car's roof continued. I tugged at my coat, staring blankly at the wet road surface. Vivian, it should be fine now. You can go back. You'll have to come to the police station again tomorrow. We need to know all of Thomas's whereabouts during the time he was missing. Thomas, just now I learned Steve's real name. I nodded, unable to resist peeking into the police station again. Thomas was leaning against the wall on one side, not looking at me, but staring at the ground. Just now a drunk woman was brought in, probably flirted with him because of his good looks, and nearly had her arm dislocated by him. For some reason, a bit of rain in the summer night could chill you to the bone. Suddenly, 2 Rolls-Royces parked in front of the police station. A distinguished man hurriedly got out of the passenger seat and headed straight into the police station. Seeing Thomas, the man rushed forward and hugged him tightly. Thomas, you're safe, that's great. Do you know everyone thought you were dead? Thomas allowed him to hug him, then probably got tired of it and pushed him away. Okay, am I dirty? The man laughed a couple of times, patting Thomas's shoulder. Stop already, Grandpa is overjoyed. Everyone was waiting for you. How's your body? Does your head still hurt? He led Thomas out of the police station, and I stood at the mouth of the station, watching them. For a moment, our eyes met again. His pitch-black eyes looked at me openly, without hiding anything, then gently passed over me. I didn't know where that sense of reluctance came from, or what I was in a hurry for. Before I knew it, I had stepped forward and stopped them. Thomas, do you really not remember anything? I looked up at him. In that instant, all eyes were on me. Thomas's expression dropped slowly to my heart, seemingly unwilling to waste a single word on me. Hello, thank you for taking care of my brother during this time. Don't worry, we will reward you handsomely. The man next to him interrupted me directly. No, I don't want any reward, it's just... But I trailed off, unable to say anything. In the silent night, Thomas's sneer suddenly burst out. Give her more money, otherwise, she'll latch onto me again and annoy me. I stood still for a moment. My appearance must have seemed too shabby, as the man beside him gave me a slight bow. I apologize, that's just his personality. I'll contact you another day. We will definitely come to thank you in person. I didn't know how long I had been standing there. It wasn't until a police officer approached and asked if I needed help that I came to my senses. What was I thinking? I was thinking Steve's expression when he looked at me just now. It didn't seem any different from the way he looked at that drunk woman. Back at home, the floor was still a mess. I stared blankly at it, thinking that when I went to find him, I was too hasty. I knocked down a shoe cabinet while grabbing an umbrella. I dropped my bag on the floor and walked into the house. The colorful pens I bought for him, brand new and not yet opened. The clothes I bought for him online, still on the way. On the coffee table, the flour-stained cookbook lay quietly. I walked over, flipped it open to the last page. The words he painstakingly wrote down, like, the next day, when I went to the police station to make a statement, just as I expected, I ran into Thomas again. He was wearing a black shirt, and sat there with his head down, emitting a vibe that said stay away. It's strange, he's the same person, but completely different now. He had layers of bandages on his forehead, probably from the night before when he got hit by a steel pipe. The police didn't have many questions for me, so I just told them how he got to my house. When I left the station, I waited at the door for a while before he arrived. He glanced at me indifferently and said, "Steve." "I'm not called Steve." His voice was slightly cold and impatient. "Yeah, he's not Steve, but I've gotten used to calling him that." "Thomas, here is a photo album and clothes left at my house. They're all for you, still unopened. I can't wear them anyway, so I brought them for you." I handed him the bag, and he just looked down at me. I used to think his eyes were beautiful, bright like they held countless tiny stars. Now, his eyes are still beautiful but more like a bottomless dark pool. He sighed. "Do you think I still need these things now, Vivian? Vivian, instead of sorting these out, why don't you go fix your hair? And as for me, don't bother about me anymore. It's useless and not necessary." I stared at his retreating figure. He really had a bad temper, and spoke very directly. "But it was you who called me sister. It was you who held me when you were scared of thunder, and then slept with me. It was you who eagerly waited for me to come home every time. It was you who first intrigued me. It was you who made a messed up life suddenly hopeful. And now you say go, then you go." I went to the hair salon and got my hair cut short. The stylist said the scissors were tangled in my hair, and even though it's a trim, it ended up being extremely short, almost reaching my ears. My hair, which used to reach my waist, was suddenly cut so short that it hurt a bit. Of course, after this incident, I had to call my dad to argue. Ironically, after 2 years of not talking, our first conversation was an argument, and he just coldly told me, "It's just hair. You're still bothered about this at your age." I was so angry that I almost threw my phone out the window, but I held back, because I didn't have money. I bought this phone with my own money, and it's not worth breaking it by being angry with them. I need to find a job, one that has no connection to my dad's company. My resume looks good, but it's like a rookie offending an old fox in the workplace. Small companies are afraid to hire me, and big companies consider the cooperation with my dad and reject me. It's funny, my dad not only allowed my stepmom to mistreat me, but also forced me to come back home and work in his company. I used to think someone else was like me, a homeless puppy, until he left me. The one always abandoned in the end was just me. I sat down and adjusted my tie one last time. This is probably my last chance. Thanks to a good friend from school, I got the opportunity to interview at this company. The good thing is that this company is quite big. Even its subsidiary is beyond my dad's influence. The bad thing is, it's notoriously difficult to get into. I had passed the first and second interviews smoothly, and it seemed the interviewers had a good impression of me. As they called my name, I stood up, straightened my clothes once more, and tried to maintain the most appropriate smile I could manage. I opened the door. The next moment, I froze. There were 5 interviewers in the room, including those who had interviewed me before and 2 older examiners. At the far end, there was a person who looked impatient with his arms crossed. "Thomas." My mind went blank for a moment, then I struggled to adjust my emotions and keep a composed facial expression. During the interview, most of the time, I answered questions from the 2 main interviewers at the front. It was strange that I could organize my thoughts to answer while still wondering what the person sitting in the corner was doing. But he remained silent throughout the whole session. It wasn't until the interview ended, and the interviewers shook hands with me, that Thomas stood up and left directly from the back door. There were 2 million more in my bank account. Even if Thomas blew up the small house I rented that day, this compensation was more than enough. When his brother came to thank me with a gift, he was thoughtful and considerate, leaving no room for criticism. I vaguely guessed that their family was wealthy, but I didn't expect his brother to be the CEO of a conglomerate. The company I interviewed with last time was also a subsidiary of his brother's conglomerate. It's the kind of CEO I probably only saw on TV in my life. And now he personally came to thank me, expressing gratitude and respect in his words. The outcome of my interview went smoothly. Just the day after the interview was over, they informed me I could start working. The company is a bit bigger than the one I used to work at, and after dinner, I had trouble finding my way back. I managed to get into an elevator, but another person was heading towards me. We barely made eye contact. I had never seen Steve in formal wear before. I used to buy him clothes, mostly athletic types like hoodies, so seeing him like that made me feel a bit strange for a moment. The man's features were sharp, with an inherently hostile aura, making him seem unapproachable. I took a few steps back, but his gaze remained on me. Just as I was about to ask him what was going on, his cold and detached voice came through. "Are you coming to my office with me?" I was a bit puzzled. It wasn't until I saw that there was only one option in the elevator, which went straight to the top floor. I had taken the wrong elevator. this was supposed to be a private lift. Seeing the rising mockery in his eyes, I no longer wanted to stay there and reached out to press the button to open the elevator doors. But when I pressed it, nothing happened. Instinctively, I turned to the person behind me. When he met my gaze, he raised an eyebrow. The whole elevator suddenly plunged into darkness. The feeling of weightlessness and impact hit me at the same time. I couldn't stand steady and crashed hard into the railing next to the elevator. The pain in my arm tugged at my nerves. I felt the elevator still plunging rapidly. My brain was blank for a moment. It wasn't until he rushed over and pressed the emergency button. After a violent impact and shaking, the dark interior of the elevator suddenly became extremely quiet. I tried to stand up, but found that my foot seemed to be twisted. "What trick is this?" In the darkness, his voice was cold and mocking. "What?" I noticed my voice was trembling a bit. "This elevator is always fine. How come you had an accident as soon as you entered?" Was he implying that I tampered with the elevator? I didn't, I explained anxiously, but all I got in response was a long silence. "Steve, for some reason, I always feel like I need to explain myself when facing him. I seem to never be satisfied. Sometimes I doubt myself, wondering if I am really as clingy as he says." In the darkness, he was completely ignoring me, focusing on urging the maintenance workers to fix the elevator quickly. Unable to stand up, I just leaned against the wall of the elevator, hugging my knees. Inexplicably, my nose began to feel sour. The lights in the elevator flashed, and with tear stains on my face, I looked at the person in front of me who was looking down. He seemed indifferent. "Yeah, what does it have to do with him anyway?" "Steve, I think there was a moment when I actually liked you. And there was a moment when I earnestly hoped you could save me from the hell I was in." I wiped off my tears and then, in the next second, I slapped him. It was a loud slap. My hand got numb. He probably didn't expect to receive such a blow. But the key was, at that moment, the maintenance worker had just fixed the elevator. The elevator door slowly opened. After I finished, I found myself facing 4 or 5 pairs of eyes outside. I must have looked panicked when I tried to escape. It must have seemed like I had done something wrong to Thomas in the elevator. In any case, Thomas hadn't recovered from the shock in the elevator, and the group of people didn't care about me. I stumbled and wandered through the crowd during peak hours, not knowing what this floor was for. My ankle was painfully throbbing, making it difficult for me to walk. Suddenly, I heard someone call my name from behind. I thought he was coming to catch me, seeking revenge for the slap. So I ran even faster. I thought he wouldn't chase me for too long in this crowded place, but he kept chasing me. In the end, because I really wasn't as familiar with this floor as he was, he directly forced me into a small meeting room. After running for so long, the person in front of me showed no signs of being out of breath. Seeing him getting closer to me, I shrank back and instinctively closed my eyes. Then everything started spinning. He hugged me. His deep, hoarse voice gently tickled my ear, his breath warm and gentle. "Sister, I never thought that Steve's memories would come back to me with a slap." I struggled with all my might, and finally, afraid that I might fall, he let me down. Then he pressed me against the table, and, with my ear caught between his teeth, apologized at lightning speed. I couldn't believe how bad his memory recovery could be. "Let go of me." I pushed away his hand that was slowly moving towards my waist, and ended up with his low laughter next to my ear. "Steve." I felt his fingers teasing my ankle, gritted my teeth, and shouted his name. "What's going on now?" "Okay, I'm Steve, if you like calling me that. I'll call you Steve from now on, okay?" He lightly rubbed my ankle, as I looked down at his black hair. "Have you remembered? How much did you remember? Why did you remember at this moment?" But it seemed like I couldn't say many words in front of him. "When you slapped me just now, I suddenly felt that the touch was familiar. So, I remembered some things." But he also knew what I was asking. "Did you ever slap me like this before?" "No way." I glared at him, then inexplicably fell into the starry eyes in front of me. I couldn't help but think of that thunderstorm day, when I slapped him unconsciously when he fell on me. When I saw the corner of his eye twitch, I inexplicably felt a sense of entanglement. It seemed like the only time I had hit him like that was when he refused to eat green peppers. But I controlled the force. "Okay, I'm such a jerk. How could I forget about you?" The man in front of me slowly got up, with his hands on either side of me, the shadows perfectly enclosing me. "Sister, there are so many things I want to tell you." He squinted his eyes, then in the next moment, uncomfortably rested his forehead on my shoulder. I then noticed that he was burning up all over, and his current state was definitely not as calm as he had just shown. "I heard that you were enduring everything just now." I tentatively touched his shoulder, and he couldn't help but tremble. But he still wanted to talk to me. "Sister, I'm sorry for not protecting you that day. On that stormy night, The young man dashed towards me without any regard for his own safety. Little did I know, Steve's condition had taken a turn for the worse since he remembered things. He suddenly collapsed in my arms, and his eyes never opened again. He was rushed to the hospital. I heard he remained unconscious for several days, showing no signs of waking up. I even submitted my resignation. You just got hired at our company a few days ago, right? Steve's brother pushed up his wire-framed glasses. I think I'm not quite fit to be around your brother anymore. Whether Steve fully recovers or not, I just don't want to be tossed around like a toy, picked up and dropped off at will. Besides, let's be practical. I'm an orphan with no parents. What right do I have to be with him? I found a job as a cashier at a convenience store. Yes, I've fallen to the level where doing this physical job won't bring down any consequences. Actually, the 2 million Steve's brother gave me is enough to last me a while. But subconsciously, I don't want to spend it. I work the night shift. There aren't many customers at night, and I often doze off at the cash register. The nights in this city are always quiet, with only the streetlights willing to shine a lonely light. The bell at the door rang. It was a rare visitor at 3 a.m., but when I saw who it was, I suddenly became more awake. Thomas was standing in front of the checkout counter, dressed in all black, staring at me quietly. Sir, what do you need? I asked. I want you, he said, low and direct. I looked up at him. Thomas, his eyes were so dark, as if they had melted into the night, and his face was paler than usual, as if his body had not fully recovered. I bit my lip and looked at him, wondering, what should I ask? Have you remembered everything? Is your head still hurting? What are you thinking about me, exactly? Thomas, give me your bank account number. Eventually, I blurted out this question. He hesitated for a moment, then obediently gave it to me. I noted it down and made a few taps on my phone. Here, take back this 2 million. It was given to me by your brother. I feel like I can't accept it, and from now on, we have no ties. Is 2 million enough to make a connection? He suddenly interrupted me. Then, my phone started receiving multiple text messages. He kept transferring money to me through his phone, each transaction being 2 million. While he transferred, he kept asking me, what about these? Are these enough? Do you want more? So many connections, until I received a notification about reaching the phone transfer limit. His eyes got a little red, and he seemed a bit crazy, a bit hysterical. He asked me softly, each word gentle, is it enough for me to marry you? Thomas had this power to make people feel incredibly sad, to make people unable to stop feeling sorry for him, even though I had no right to feel sorry for him. I don't want your money. That was my only defense, but he asked me, then what do you want? Whatever you want, I'll give it to you, okay? In fact, Thomas had always been a bit clingy when he was a little crazy. Now, he was even clingier. Vivian, has anyone ever told you that you look pretty with short hair? He had stopped calling me sister, and started calling me by my name. He followed me to the front door, or rather, he had been following me for 2 or 3 days. I didn't know if this could be considered harassment, as the neighbors thought I was trying to climb higher by being with him. I locked him out, but he ended up sleeping in the corridor. It had been 2 or 3 days already. Do you have nowhere else to go? I finally couldn't stand it and turned to ask him. As a matter of fact, I sleep outside. I'm fine. It's just a bit windy at night, and I can't sleep well. I feel cold, that's all. I stared at his eyes, somehow moist and pitiful. Finally, I sighed, opened the door, and let him in. The first thing he did after entering was to push me against the door, and kiss me passionately. The room was still dark, and all I could hear were his low, ragged breaths, and his restrained calls of my name. His hands were restless, deliberately wandering to the places I didn't let him touch, and his lips carried the scent of this man. I struggled for a few moments, and he just put my hands behind my back. Then, near my ear, he chuckled. Vivian, do you know what letting the wolf into the house means? You should be more on guard next time. Perhaps there was a hint of a sob in my voice, and that's when he let me go. I grabbed his collar, and in the blurry view, I could see the flickering lights outside, falling in fragmented pieces on a person's heart. I simply can't be with you. Don't you understand? My parents don't want me. I'm broke, sure. You might like me a bit, but what's the point? How long can you even like me for? If it weren't for me bringing you home, you wouldn't have even glanced at me, would you? Just like you said back then. You said it, right? I gripped his collar tightly, tears falling from the tip of my nose, then splattering on the ground. You say it. Tell me not to cling to you anymore. Not getting what I want has always been my destiny. However, the person in front of me simply crouched down and carefully wiped away my tears. Do you think I can't do anything? Then let me show you, okay? My stepmother started calling me frantically. So did my dad. At first, they could maintain their parents' demeanor. But later, my dad started groveling to me. Vivian, you're my daughter. You wouldn't want to see your dad go bankrupt, would you? The room was all set for you and your mom. Come back and stay for a few days. Then, I heard about the arguments between my dad and stepmother. I wasn't intentionally snooping, but their ugly doings had spread like wildfire throughout the city. The rumors my stepmother spread over the years about me being a mistress child suddenly started to be refuted. The last phone call I received was from my stepmother, crying and begging me for forgiveness, begging me to let her go. I was finishing up packing the last few things in the house. Downstairs, the street was bustling with traffic, horns blaring in the air. Suddenly, a memory struck me. One night, she got a sudden fever and wanted to eat crystal shrimp dumplings. My dad asked me, who was studying for exams at the time, to put down my books and go buy them for her in the pouring rain. I had been settling down in recent months, moved to a new house and found a job. A luxury car was parked in front of the company, and at first, I thought some big boss was coming to discuss cooperation, until the car window rolled down slowly. It was Steve, his brother. He still smiled politely at me, always looking elegant and perfect behind his gold-rimmed glasses. Vivian, do you have time? My grandfather wants to see you. I had imagined this day would come. Class differences will always be a gap between people, no matter how well-intentioned one might have been in the past. The car seats were leather. My dad's old car wasn't that bad, you could say, but I had always walked to and from school. Only Cindy had a chauffeur. I hadn't seen my half-sister in a long time. Heard she tried to seduce Thomas, but failed. Stay away from your sister. Steve frowned, the only comment on Cindy. I had always known Cindy didn't like me. She always wanted to take what I had. Not out of affection, just grabbing things, not wanting anything that was just mine. The destination was a villa in the mountains, and it was midsummer, probably meant for escaping the heat. There were no pedestrians in the mountains, just our car winding through the mountain roads. As we climbed towards the mountain range, an open space suddenly appeared. A courtyard composed of quaint buildings, a stream crossing through, surrounded by lush greenery, with tree shadows swaying gently. The waterfall flowing down the distant mountainside brought about a sense of secluded tranquility. Vivian, come with me. Someone approached to open the car door for me, and Steve stood in front of me, turning back to smile at me. I followed him all the way. From afar, the summer heat in the mountains was not hot, and the path guided us well into the shade, until we arrived in front of a building, where the beaded curtains were drawn inside, but I assumed it was a tea house. Steve stood at the door, indicating for me to enter on my own. After walking in the scorching heat for a while, feeling the cool breeze from the air conditioning as I entered, I felt refreshed. But my heart grew cold as I made eye contact with the old man sitting at the tea table. Please, have a seat. He pointed to a side seat next to the tea table. I took a few steps, about to sit down, when the door was suddenly pushed open. Steve burst in, out of breath, and his eyes lit up when he saw me. Coming over, he pulled me behind him. What do you want with her? This sentence made me imagine all sorts of family conflicts, rebellious teens running away, or elopements. But the old man sitting in the main seat seemed completely innocent. What do I want? I just wanted to invite my granddaughter-in-law for tea. I brought out my best tea. Thomas, you have a girlfriend now, I get it. Just let me see what your girlfriend looks like, okay? Why don't you show her to me? This statement made Steve fall silent. He lowered his gaze, quietly clasped my hand, brushed his fingertip over my palm, giving it a squeeze. I haven't courted her yet. Grandfather fell silent then, following up swiftly by introducing his grandson to me, like he was marketing a product. Young lady, do you have any concerns? Our Thomas is excellent. He used to get perfect scores when he was little. You saw his appearance, top notch. The main thing is, in our family, you can rest assured, the thing we have the most of is money. I know you young people nowadays don't value money the most, but as the saying goes, money is essential. Before he could finish speaking, Steve interrupted. You should mind your own business, Grandpa. I heard you're bringing another opera troupe over again. Well, go watch the opera, but don't look at my girlfriend. Before I could ask Steve how did I become his girlfriend, he grabbed my hand and led me out. He pulled me along, walking down a path lined with white pebbles, passing by several layers of water features. A small building emerged. This is my room. My family comes here every year to escape the heat. Steve pulled me in, sat on the bed and looked up at me. After staring for a while, he took my wrist, resting his head gently on my lower abdomen. His muffled voice sounded as the air conditioning hummed loudly. The sensation of his hand holding mine felt inexplicable. Vivian, when I was about 17, on my way home, someone targeted me. It was the owner of a bankrupt company acquired by our family who kidnapped me. His daughter, who had been living a luxurious life, couldn't handle the bankruptcy and committed suicide. He went crazy and thought everything was our family's fault, so he kidnapped me for revenge. During that time, I don't even know what kind of drug he gave me. My consciousness wasn't clear. When I woke up, I was in a completely unfamiliar place. I later concluded, based on my sparse memories, that I was probably sold to the northern region of Myanmar, because I always remember the scorching hot sun and parasites in the water. I was still clear-headed at the time, being scolded and abused like an animal by people. I was trying to find ways to contact my family. You know me. I'm not one to sit around waiting for death. I convinced almost all the laborers sent there to work. Then I initiated an internal rebellion. Frankly, it was my first time holding a gun and witnessing someone dying in front of me. Result: I thought I was clever, thinking those people who flaunt their power with guns were nothing special. But I was betrayed. Their leader caught me and tortured me. They thought I was dead, so they threw me into the river. I didn't die though. My head got messed up. I can vaguely remember those days. They called me stupid, kicked me with their feet. Then somehow I made it back home. I was captured and worked as a laborer, kicked out of the market, even beaten up by thugs. Those days were probably too painful. I still can't remember everything. Until someone appeared. He held my hand tighter, his voice tinged with hoarseness. I could feel him holding something back. She smiled at me, took me back home. She cooked for me, bought me new clothes. She gave me a sketchbook and a pen, so I drew her. She went to work, but all I could do was draw her. Do you know how much I like her? I waited for her to come home every day, but I'm a jerk. I made her angry, messed up her home. I couldn't even protect her. I even forgot about her. The air conditioner inside was still buzzing. A corner of brilliant afternoon light seeped through the window. He embraced me tightly. How could I bear to let go? You don't know how much I like her. She doesn't know what she means to me. I'm a scoundrel. I just don't want to look back. I just want her. Even if she rejects me 100 times, I will still pursue her. When we both become old, I'll steal her wheelchair. Then she can only sit in my arms. The mountain wind howled, the bell outside the corridor swayed. He held me like this, but as soon as I made a move to leave, he held me even tighter. I raised my hand and slowly stroked his head. The boy's short hair was actually very soft and felt nice. He stiffened for a moment, his faint shadow falling into the fine light. I gently said to him, "Okay, in the future, when we are both gray-haired, just keep walking with me, Steve." Epilogue. That night staying at his house, Steve took me to see the stars in the mountains. His room actually had a skylight. Lying in bed, you could see the countless stars in the sky. But as I watched, I remembered something not quite right. "Steve," I sat up, squinting at him, "is your grandpa spoiling you too much? Would he kick you out for changing your name? You're pretending to be pitiful and fooling me." The rest of my words were blocked by his lips. The man chuckled lightly in my ear, his hand also becoming restless. The night was long, and there were more things we needed to discuss. One day later, I mentioned to Steve's brother about Steve changing his name. Steve's brother's response was, "Change his name, as long as he's happy. Grandpa can change his name."